Hey there, welcome to Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at what makes them do what they do. I'm Pete Townsend, your co-host of Money Never Sleeps, along with Owen Fitzgerald. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is kindly sponsored by Ireland's fintech and financial services recruitment specialists, Top Tier Recruitment. If you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with a team at Top Tier Recruitment. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com and tell them we sent you. In this episode, Paul Smith and I talked to Sorcha Mulligan, founder of the SMEChain, helping businesses figure out what blockchain and distributed ledger technology means to SMEs in the enterprise supply chain space. Given the circles that Sorcha, Paul, and I all travel in, we had quite a bit to talk about. Did someone say blockchain? So let's dive right into this week's episode of Money Never Sleeps.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Here we go again. Welcome to Money Never Sleeps. We're recording today from the offices of our sponsor, Top Tier Recruitment. I'm Pete Townsend.
Paul Smith.
And Paul is here again. Thank you for coming back on the show, Paul. Owen, this week, again, is unfortunately unavailable. But like I've been saying on the last two episodes, when Owen Fitzgerald isn't here, he is off trying to raise money for Irish startups. So that is a good thing. But Paul, we appreciate your introspection and view on all things happening in the world. So thank you for coming back. We're here today with Sorcha Mulligan, founder of the SMEChain. Welcome to the show, Sorcha.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Paul. And thanks for the pronunciation. Spot on this time.
Finally
Sorcha Mulligan, correct.
Finally got it right. Shout out to Stevie Mulligan, who I grew up with. So it's very easy to say your second name. I got that right. Stevie Mulligan is a huge U2 fan. I remember when I was 13, I went to go see the Rattle and Hum movie in the cinemas, and Stevie sat next to me and he sang the whole thing.
Good memory.
He's now living in the U.S., but he's got family from Ireland originally. His parents were both from Ireland before he moved over. Anyway, long story short, what we're going to do today, Sorcha, you and I have been running into each other quite a lot recently at different events. I know you from your previous role out there in the industry with one of the last folks that you were working with, but given our conversations and where those have gone over the course of the past year, I thought it'd be great just to bring you on the show and kind of dig into that a bit with what you're up to right now and what you're doing. So just to get things started, why don't you give us your backstory, how you got to this point, and what you're up to?
Sure. Well, great to finally sit down and have these conversations, because I guess we started speaking about 2 years ago in the fintech sphere. I had been working in a self-employed capacity, actually in the fintech space, connecting retired or redundant human collateral from the recession with fintechs across Ireland. My further legacy, I'm a career banker. I worked in London in two of the Irish Tier 1 banks, so AIB and Bank of Ireland. My career background is in corporate, commercial, treasury banking, and then with Barclays Wealth International in London, I was in international wealth. So I've had quite an exposure to very large organizations and the financial sphere, very diverse cultural backgrounds, very diverse product propositions, as well as client engagement, relationship building, entrepreneurial innovation, and incentives in different organizations. I worked in London predominantly, and during the recession years, my clients were corporate treasurers. When things were getting a little bit tough, all of my clients were corporate treasurers who had corporate treasury policies that a bank had to be A minus, double B status minimum in order for them to place cash with me. So that was anywhere from 1 to 10 million of sterling or euro in vanilla money market products. But as things deteriorated with Ireland, then we had to look at other ways of maintaining relationships. So I was studying with the Association of Corporate Treasurers. So I was studying from the perspective of my clients. So getting an insight into how their brains worked, what their challenges were from an operational perspective, and infiltrating from that perspective. I wasn't a career accountant. all of my my peer students on the course were accountants with maybe 20 years experience, and as well had been working in a treasury role for a number of years, and they were running multinational organizations and subsidiaries all over the world. And I was a banker selling vanilla products, and really had to throw myself in the deep end. And
how was that?
It was so challenging, but so rewarding. Yeah. And you get to see real people. So it removes that enigma of the title that somebody has and their status. So rather than them being a multinational and a group treasurer, suddenly you're both flailing about trying to study and not fail the next test that's coming up.
Yeah.
Particularly because we did an offsite for a week. And then you really get to know the people behind the brands that you're speaking to. Relationships grew with some of the biggest multinationals, brought them back it was AIB that I was with at the time, onboarded a number of those clients. Though because of the recession, triple B status, I was no longer a product partner. I ended up being a politician and an economist for the Irish economy.
Okay.
So it was beyond what the skill set was for the job, but the passion and the motivation of supporting your country and your economy and your people and your brand, and the people that you worked with as well was phenomenal. So I got headhunted into Bank of Ireland, and I was set up to run exact same setup as I did in AIB, but things just got bleaker and bleaker. And if you had a blank canvas and a new team, and you were asked to repeat what you'd done before, it was impossible. So the bank started to put the treasury and salespeople into into lending roles. And I wasn't a lender. I wasn't going to sit down and read through reports, etc. So I had actually been speaking to Barclays before that, and Barclays came back to me about 7 months into my role at Bank of Ireland and said, hey, we'd love you to come on board if things have changed for you. During that time, backstory, I'd gone traveling during my garden leave, and I had a taste for scuba diving, which plays a big part in my complete change of stake into entrepreneurial career focus.
Scuba diving did that.
Scuba diving, yeah.
No, I've done a bit of that in my day.
Yeah. Well, the way it happened, I did go to Barclays and I spent a year there, and that's where entrepreneurial Sorcha really just came to the forefront. Where I'd grown up with the Irish banks, it was more of friends, family and community. Going into Barclays, it was, no, you prove your worth. You watch your back. And you get some really great core people inside this giant organization, and you build your team across different functions. And it was really powerful.
What was the analogy with scuba diving?
Yeah, so scuba diving, yes, I do jump. Thank you for bringing me back.
No.
But while I was having this fantastic time with Barclays and learning so much and growing as a person, all I kept thinking was, I want to go back to scuba diving in Southeast Asia, and I want to travel more Australia, and I'm 29 and I don't really know what I want to do with my life. So
I'm with you. I'm with you. When my wife and I were traveling probably 13 years ago before we got to Ireland, that day-to-day kind of where are we going to sleep tonight? Right?
Yeah.
Let's find a place just to crash, a clean place, hopefully with some good pillows, to crash tonight. And always some type of hotel by the time we got to Australia at least, right? But it was always that mentality of, yes, with all of these other things that you have going on to figure out where you're going to lay your head, you still want to enjoy your day. Yeah. Right? You still want to have a good time. So just enjoy the day. Don't worry too much about where you're going to lay your head at the end of the day, because it will all work out. Right? And just getting back to that mentality of enjoy your day and trying to bring that into the professional world, right? Trying to find that crossover point is really hard.
But what if you've never had that? And it's never been instilled into you.
You should go get it. Yeah.
Exactly. So when you're in my lifetime, and I think this is something that I'd like to touch on a bit later on as well, is that our parents' generation, my parents both come from SMEs, one a multinational, one a micro business in a very rural community. And we were all encouraged as children to work for multinationals. This is where you're going to be safe. This is where you're going to have pensions. So we all did that.
Yeah,
Every single one.
In the bank.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Myself and my sister went straight into banking. My sister's still in investment banking. My brother works for one of the GAFA. Another works for in the UAE for a government think tank. So we all did what we were encouraged to do. I moved overseas when I was 19. But what we were told to do and encouraged to do was study, work hard, progress. Get up the ivory ladder. And I felt that I had achieved everything in my career that I wanted to when I was 29 and I wasn't satisfied.
Yeah.
So when I said to Barclays, listen, thank you so much for everything you've done here, but I feel like I need to do more and maybe come back. And they were so encouraging about it. They just said, never regret anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still in contact with the management team and a lot of the team that I built up across the group there, who actually happen to be in fintech at the moment. But the reason I got into scuba diving is because I was absolutely petrified of water.
Yeah.
I was terrified of sharks. I'd seen Jaws when I was a kid. And I thought, I need to get over this. So what is the best way to get over this? I learn how to do absolutely everything myself so that if something ever happens down there, that I can rely on myself rather than having to be terrified and get somebody to clean my mask or, fix my buoyancy or whatever. And it took me across 8 different Southeast Asian countries, including Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, East Timor, which was phenomenal, the Philippines, Singapore.
Yeah.
If I mentioned the Philippines. And I got to experience all these different cultures and all these different people who were so satisfied by minimalistic life.
Get through your day. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was very interesting. But I was a freelancer at this stage, so I was accountable for my P&L all day, every day.
Yeah.
And this is the first time that I'd really done that I didn't have a wage coming in every month.
Yeah.
That I had to go and find people that were willing to take me on, and also to trust me to look after the people's lives that I had on their boat that day. I also got involved in conservation work for NGOs and supporting the conservation of coral reefs and shark finning, whales, dolphins, manta rays. But then, that's an 18-month period. AIB had contacted me during that period and said, oh, hey, what are you doing? A lot's happened since the recession. We're back open for business. We want you back as a business developer. So after another 3 months, I asked them very politely to wait, which they did.
Yeah.
I went back and my objective was to completely move away from property and public sector and all of that. And I did that for about another year and a half.
Yeah.
And then I decided it's time to move back to Ireland. I did go back to Asia for another 2 months.
Yeah, good. More scuba diving.
Absolutely, and more freelancing on the more freelancing for myself. And when I got back to Ireland, I didn't really know the landscape. I didn't have a network. And I went to 2 or 3 different recruiters to register, and all of them offered me a job to become a financial services recruitment consultant. So I chose I thought, what have I got? Sales, I've got personality, I've got financial services background, and I'm a risk taker. Why not? Let's do this. So I did that very successfully for a year and a half for a firm. I chose them because they were very well established in healthcare. And in healthcare and hospitals and doctors. There was no finance. So no finance, no professional services, no legal. So I set all of that up.
Yeah.
And then after a year and a half, I thought, why am I filling somebody else's pockets when I could be doing this for myself?
Yeah.
So all of that led to me having the confidence in myself to go out there. What I found when I was checking inside the windows of all of the organisations in Ireland, this is from the capital markets all the way down to corporate, commercial finance, into the SME lending sphere, which was absolutely booming, and I was very successful in placing people there, a lot of whom are still in their jobs today. So I feel like I identified the right people and characteristics, even if they didn't look immediately like they would fit the bill. But that's all down to perspective.
Yep.
Then I found the growing fintech sphere. And in the fintech space, there was a lot of propositions out there and tech platforms that didn't have the commercial acumen. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I was matching talent that had retired or who were on voluntary severance and didn't really know what fintech was. And making a connection that way, which was really fulfilling for both sides, because those people didn't know what they wanted to do next. And this is when I found Invoice Fair, who I was working for last. So in comparison to the other lenders in the fintech space, they maybe turned over or lended out about 80 million, something like that. Whereas you get to this capital markets platform that's already funded 200 million in the Irish economy, which just seemed phenomenal in comparison to others. So I started consulting with them, and they actually counterpitched me across the table, which tends to happen to me quite a lot.
Yeah.
And that I was introducing what I could do to get more people on board in their business, build the teams. And they said, well, would you consider it yourself? So I still had a number of other clients that I was working with. So for 6 months, I worked part-time with them. And then after that 6 months, they'd been asking me to come in full-time, quickly creeping up to 300 million, 350 million. It was very exciting. I got to bring the brand overseas to the UK in particular, Northern Ireland. So difficult markets to get into. But everybody that I spoke to, it was something completely different to what they had on the ground available for their SMEs. So when I started in the fintech scene back in 2016, I came across blockchain technology.
Yeah.
And
How?
I wanted to learn how to code because I had no idea how to do that. No, I still haven't learned how to code. But what I came across code poetry and how to learn this technology as a language and treat it like a language rather than sophisticated mathematics, which kind of terrified me.
Yeah.
I found this online course, Princeton University, blockchain for software developers. I thought, well, why not? I'll get the framework about it, learn about Merkle trees, all that cool stuff. And what I started to find out were the business cases behind it and not just the cryptocurrency side, because I haven't focused on that whatsoever. Bitcoin doesn't come up in conversation with me at all. It's the underlying technology and its capabilities. So the plumbing, as it's been mentioned in the past. Or the vehicle for these technologies. So I was studying that since 2016, and then while working in the real world, figuring out I want to be involved in this in the future. So how do I apply what I've learned to my daily job?
Yeah.
And where will it fit in eventually? I could see that through 2017 and 2018 in particular, that multinationals had started to form consortium.
Yep.
And they were testing it particularly in the supply chain side and as proof of concepts in trade finance and supply chain finance. While I was working with SMEs in the supply chain of multinationals, I was therefore thinking, okay, so all of these SMEs who have quite low tech sophistication are plugged into ERP systems of multinationals. And at some stage, these multinationals who are in consortium are going to turn around to the SME and say, hey, you guys, you're going to need to upgrade or invest in your technology in order to remain on our preferred supplier list. Yeah. And then I thought, eureka, okay, this is something that I can go and focus on. So that started in February of this year. And then I spoke to Invoice Fair about my underlying passion to progress with this and see where it would take me. And then in July, I finished up and went out on my own since August. So much research I've undertaken in the past few months has taken me on multiple rabbit holes. I think anybody who's in the sphere. Yeah,
you're doing a lot. And I mean, Sorcha, you're quite active on LinkedIn in terms of sharing all this stuff. Yeah. And I see how you've become an expert at tagging, right? And saying that, listen, you get these keywords in there, you get certain people tagged in there, and people will naturally come back to you on this, right? Which is pretty cool. I really like kind of your how you walked through your experience there and what you had done before this point, in terms you can kind of see it all bubbling up, right? And the different experiences before the financial crisis, going into the financial crisis, after the financial crisis, moving from having these conversations with corporates to having the conversations with SMEs. I'm sure all of that experience, you said it a couple of minutes ago, led to a degree of confidence for you to do your own thing. Is that kind of the case? That, listen, the more and more conversations you have, the more experiences that you kind of have poured into you through others that that have experienced things, that kind of builds your own relational database nearly of experiences.
That's a good way of looking at it, Pete, because it's conversations. That's how I learn. I learn about what's real and happening in the context around it. The statistics that I'm finding in the background, that I'm plugging in every other post now and then just to see who's picking it up and the traction I get behind it. Because the number one thing at the moment for evolving technology is inclusivity. Technology inclusivity. So we have financial inclusivity, which people are working on at the moment, and my previous employer, Invoice Fair, and a lot of fintechs and decentralized platforms are working on how they can include more individuals unbanked, as well as SMEs who aren't so technically sophisticated in financial. But the technology inclusivity it's important, and I find that in SME Ireland at the moment, and I shared some statistics with you, and I posted them on LinkedIn, and I'd be interested in other people's feedback and what they're seeing out there in the field. But what I found from an OECD report in March of this year was that SMEs in Ireland are lagging behind other nation states when it comes to financial, technology, sophistication and exports, which is disappointing to hear because we have such good news stories getting out there, such an evolved and hard-working culture. And on the MNC side, then we're the second largest in the world for exports of ICT services. So then looking inward, why is there an imbalance? And surely there must be something that we can do in order to plug that gap. It's interesting because the Boston Consulting Group in 2013 did a research document that was published mentioning a number of OECD states again, and how technology leaders, SME technology leader states, benefited the economy from exports, growth in revenue, growth in employees. And, that report was back in 2013, and it was because of the growth in cloud technology. Now we're in 2019, and we're looking at the next wave of technology coming along, and it's coming along fast. And that means that the technology divide, if it's not addressed, that's going to widen even further.
It will. And is there a certain case to be made for Ireland, though, with all this, Sorcha, that we're kind of in the Goldilocks zone, right? Of 5 million people in this country with a market that is pretty condensed. And geographically, you can get from one side of the country to the other in less than 2 hours. That we've got a big enough market here for SMEs to, build a business, have a comfortable lifestyle, and not do much else with it, right? And the fact that they've been able to get their businesses to the size they've been able to get them to is impressive. But is there a kind of reticence to go to that next level, and a risk-taking appetite that is because of it's a small market, it's 5 million people. Paul's looking at me. What do you think, Paul? You've corrected me in the past on some of my perceptions around Ireland and Irish culture with some of this.
I'm not sure. I think there's an issue around funding, definitely, for Irish SMEs. And if you look at some of the clients we've worked with that have set up here because of Brexit, that'll be in that fintech category. Pre-Series A rounds even are multiples of what Irish companies would get. So I think there is a funding issue. I think there is something about, even though the world is more connected with Skype and Zoom and VCs, and it's easy to get a flight anywhere from Dublin. If you're not based in country, it can be hard to penetrate a country.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what your experience was in that, actually, with InvoiceFair, with others.
Yeah.
But I think there is kind of a barrier around that. And I don't know, if you get a decent percentage of the Irish market, it's not a decent percentage of any other market.
Yeah.
You're going to the UK with, I don't know, 500,000 users or whatever. 500,000 is nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's a point around that as well, though. We had the brain drain back in the 2005, 2008 era, where all of generation immigration flocked off with all of their experience, great educations, some of the Irish Ivy Leagues. And now I'm seeing that a lot of the startups are incentivized to export fast scale, go into other markets. And then the Irish SMEs aren't getting the benefit of the startups and the products and services that they're developing. I mean, I've been speaking with some of the university innovation campuses in other countries, not yet Ireland, but in other countries that would see a very similar landscape, that there is a bit of a technology gap. But I think if incentives were there for startups to really serve it's 70% of the economy.
Yeah.
Our SMEs.
Yeah.
And according to the CSO in 2014, 92.4 of those are micro businesses. A micro business is less than 2 million turnover.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount, and a fraction of those will be at the 2 million scale, and then below that, it's a lot of the services business. Like I said, my dad's a micro business in the Midlands. There's an infrastructure issue that's still ongoing. We only got plugged into broadband in September 2019.
Yeah.
So that's not an isolated situation. But I think I'd love to see more focus on Irish SMEs rather than just the startups trailblazing and the multinationals. These are the people that are growing our communities, and the smaller businesses as well. So some good media shout outs to that segment of the market.
Absolutely.
I wonder, is there kind of a thing around, Irish people need to own land or own a house?
Yeah.
And I think there's a piece around giving away a bit of your business as well. If you've built it to a stage where you're looking at bringing equity on, or looking at bringing it to the next level, and equity is what you need to do, I think a lot of Irish people are afraid of that. They don't want to do it. Yeah,
and I think as well that there's, if you're thinking from a lending perspective, that the banks, that they need collateral, either be that through bricks and mortar or receivables, that it doesn't necessarily need to be, it's the opportunity cost and the opportunity lost. And other economies have done that very well, like Germany in particular. A model was outlined by the OECD along with four in total, highlighting the impact of how the banks lent to scaling SMEs without any collateral. So incentivized lending. So to see that in action would be really great. But not all companies want to scale. Yeah. They don't want to be, and that's brilliant. But they also need technology in order to remain relevant. And it just opens up the opportunity for other business models that they may never have even considered before. And that's the point that I'd like to see raised out there, that it's not a bottom line cost, it's a future opportunity. And also, if there's a succession issue in a business where the founders of the business are aging and they don't have any family in Ireland, which is a big thing, or who are interested in taking over the business, that if there's maybe technology involved, that it could open up other avenues.
Absolutely. Sorcha, when you and I first had a conversation, a more detailed conversation about what you're up to, probably about a year ago, I really got the impression that you were kind of driving all over the country, going to talk to as many SMEs as possible as you could about value proposition in the business that you're working for at the time with InvoiceFair, and just talking to SMEs about the benefits of receivable-based lending, right? Or using the assets on your balance sheet to grow, right? And there was, so much of that space now with where blockchain and distributed ledger technologies are going is really, and I think this is your point, are really around, this ability to use your assets to get some financing and get some funding is really going to become dependent upon how willing are you to demonstrate that these assets that you say you have, actually you do have, right? And what is that trust, right? And that distributed trust, and that's where distributed ledger technologies and blockchain come to play. How did you figure that out? What was your kind of single learning point of, okay, listen, I've got this great experience here going out to talk to all these SMEs. You've done your blockchain course, right?
Multiple. I've done about 6.
Yeah. Was there kind of a crystallization point that said, oh, wait a minute, this is how I'm going to do it?
I think education is pivotal, and it's so difficult to find a course in a university or a training course for a couple of days that you'd spend 5 or 6 grand on minimum. It's very expensive.
Yep.
And then I found Coursera and multiple courses on there. And then I was 6-week courses I was condensing into a weekend at a time.
Okay.
Through the summer. And so I was binge learning.
Yeah.
I really was. It was the Netflix of education. And it was learning from different perspectives as well, like the New York Institute of Finance versus the Tavistock's over in Canada, and their perspective of decentralized versus the US and their centralized mentality of working with the banks. And then I did some of Consensus's course on Ethereum. But I did a supply chain course as well. And then once you get enough of the today real-time info and then start to apply it to some of my own experience, then I started to really get into the academia and the white papers and the research papers. And then all of it starts to come together.
Yeah, it does.
And then what you need to do, or what I needed to do, was then get out into the market and start to talk to some of the players. So in fact, they were coming to me through LinkedIn posts. I was in a very unique position that I had understood the opportunity that reverse marketing can offer. By all I have to do is send out posts, making sure that the people that wrote them were copied into them, that they'd written some great contact and fact checking, to the nth as well. And then I'd get a lot of inbound requests to align on projects and for insight, information share. And that got me into the enterprise space. So selling to treasurers again, for TMS, Treasury Management System propositions to open up the supplier channels across a global institution or a global multinational for intercompany lending, let's say. And then another on the supply chain side with a US-based a US-based client, and then on those very established businesses, and then on the evolving space where they didn't yet have pilot clients, the platform's trying to decide how do they enlist a test pilot SME. And my question was always, well, what is it in it for them? Because the EU is giving away PhD researchers for free to SMEs to take on board for a year. They'll pay all of their wages. So in order for them to undertake a project, and it could be in technology, it could be involving technology and how it would impact the business. So if they can't get those researchers into an SME, then why would a company pay for to be a guinea pig? There's a lot to risk. It's different if you're in a multinational and you've got an innovation center and you can bring academia and everybody in. You've got the time and resources to do that. But if you're an SME and every day is, bottom line every day, then it's difficult to get that moving. So I think that there's incentives for that as well. R&D tax credits are good for it, maybe to simplify them down. but technology partners as well, like second in the world for ICT services exports. So if we could turn some of that around into the Irish economy, to those smaller businesses, maybe get an IT researcher, not a researcher, a qualified IT consultant to go in-house into a segment of SMEs and advise them on what they could do.
And is that your mission with the SMEChain?
It's one of my missions.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Overall, what is the vision with the SMEChain? Where do you want this business to get to?
So it is technology inclusivity is the priority. That's the mission. It is working selectively with companies that need guidance or that need to be plugged into investors or other platforms for joint venture programs. Academia and other partners.
I get that.
Yeah.
You make a very good point by saying that, when it's a big corporate thinking about its next wave of business model and how technology plays an increasingly important role in that because of how much distributed systems can now provide to a business and an ecosystem of your customers and suppliers. When you think about a small business trying to do the same thing, they're placing a great amount of trust on people external to their business to be able to share with them how they should do that. And how do you actually just embrace that and bring that all in?
Yeah.
You need a certain type of, like you said, knowledge and experience in the area to be able to advise these folks. It's not easy.
No.
When was a moment where you were like, okay, listen, this is actually doable. I'm going to be able to pull this off?
February this year.
Yeah.
When I that's unfair to say. So I really started to embed into my head in February that I need to do this. I will do this. There is a gap in the market here. And we talked about this, that nobody else is talking about this from the SME's perspective. And again, this is the knowledge barrier that the consortia have been formed for the last 3 or 4 years. Even before that, some go back to 2012, 2013. And so when this is all completely manufactured and ready in the multinational sphere, then they turn around to the SMEs who just have to react. Like when 3D printing first came out and the hearing aid manufacturing companies were mandated from procurement across the world to adopt the 3D printing technology to their manufacturing, or they'd be dropped from the supply chain. And that was a real moment for me to think, okay, well, where are we in day 500 of the evolution of this technology, and who is going to be impacted first? And from what I could see, it was potentially SMEs in the supply chain of multinationals, particularly those that didn't have an ERP system. Now, going back to the OECD report and the actual logistics of that report, 28% of the 70% of our Irish economy, SME economy, 28% of an ERP system, so enterprise resource planning. So API enabled to plug into the supply chain procurement software in order for them to continue to trade and win tenders, etc. Only 12% have a supply chain management. 12%. So again, it's that technology inclusivity.
Yeah.
If we're not talking to the SMEs about what they need to be investing in,
they're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will.
We can't compete.
They will. Thinking about your successes in these areas, Sorcha, what do you think are some of the personality traits of your own that have been helpful to you in getting to this point?
Thick skin, not afraid to take risks. And I think that always goes back to sitting in London during the worst days of the recession, client-facing, speaking with treasurers, being laughed at on the phone.
Yeah.
Laughed at. It was awful. And all you could do was put down the phone and just turn around, okay, what can we do? You know, now you could still have some really great relationships with clients, but if you were going out for it was just a waste of time.
Yeah.
So the thick skin, absolutely no fear in taking a risk. And I think going traveling really did get that ingrained in me. Having absolutely no regrets. Put myself in uncomfortable positions, such as the podcast today.
Yeah.
That was a big one for me, in honesty.
We talked a couple of weeks ago about always putting yourself in positions that you're completely unqualified for.
Yeah.
Right? And
Thanks for that, Pete.
No, not you. Not you. I mean me. I've always strived myself to put myself into situations that I'm completely unqualified for. And we had Eddie Dillon on from Credit Logic, and he was talking about, you know, how he had kind of went through his career. And that sometimes you can just get in there and sell something without really having a strong technical understanding of it. And then after the fact, go off and get that strong technical understanding of it and come back, and you're going to tell the story a lot better, not just because you've learned about it, but because you've already sold it once, right? And maybe, you know, tried to sell it and failed and had an important learning experience there.
But if you can't fail, you're never going to grow.
Yeah.
You have to be able to accept. I accept to myself that I will fail at certain things, and then I'll put one foot in front of the other, breathe, keep going, keep moving. Because the only thing that scares me is never trying.
Yeah.
And if I don't try, then I don't make a change to myself, and I don't impact the mission that I feel that I'm on.
Yeah.
And hopefully and as long as I have purpose and I'm influencing positive change without greed, then I'm happy in the objectives that I'm setting myself.
So you're not a fan of Gordon Gekko then?
Hey, listen, it was good to read, right? or watch, indeed.
When you talk about fear of failure, it's one of the things I see an awful lot on the coaching side of our business.
Yeah.
And it sounds easy to say, you know, get over that, it's going to happen. You have to but how do you do that? Is that something you were born with? Is it an innate kind of quality that you have? Or?
It's an intention. So the reason I went scuba diving was because absolutely terrified of water. And for the first 3 days of the course, it usually takes 2. It took 3 with me, and I had an ex-army official who was my instructor, and he said, "You're going to break me." And he was brilliant in honesty, and he just said, "You can do this. Why do you make it so difficult for yourself?" And then that was all of the fears and the insecurities and the lack of confidence from, you know, years of being in rooms where I felt that maybe I wasn't good enough. You know, and I think that's financial services, it's banking. It's certainly a woman in business development. In the years that I was in London, I was always one of very few women in the room. So all of that, and just why should I be able to do this, or why am I worthy? So every day I do something that scares me.
Prove yourself that you can.
Yeah. And that, do you know what? I'm okay. Nobody died.
Yeah.
And, well, that's great. So just keep going rather than stagnate.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, from an entrepreneurial perspective. You talked about it being potentially a trait in financial services or in women. It's that kind of, I don't know if I'm good enough to be here or whatever. We talked about
imposter
this.
syndrome.
Yeah.
Oh, imposter syndrome.
I actually think that's a driver.
See, guys feel that too. Didn't
Totally.
know that.
Oh, big time.
I think it's a lot more common than people even talk about. And it's that thing that drives you.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not good enough to be here, so I need to be better. I need to be better. I need to do more. I need to do more.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a student of VC for the last 3 years and trying to figure out the right strategy to become an investor, right? And I've had 3 experiences over the last 3 years that have gone in certain directions. And I was at the Irish Venture Capital Association dinner last month for the first time.
All tucked up.
Guess? No, it was actually casual. Well, business casual. Guess who felt like an imposter in the room? Yeah, yours truly.
No.
Yeah, totally. I had some great conversations, but I'm like, and I've seen some of these folks around town, and I've had chats with them, had a couple even on the show, but it was still, you know, because the biggest check I've ever written was the 6-figure check to get me out of a bad mortgage, right? That I need, you know, that there's still that syndrome. Now, I had a conversation with somebody the other day around, around their fund and their venture capital strategy and where they're going. And I'm like, I'm kind of on the other side, it felt like now that I'm actually helping them try to make some decisions about their own risk appetite and what are they going to do with something. I'm like, geez, this is, okay, we're turning the corner now. Have you had any of those experiences? Tell me about imposter syndrome and something that could be.
Oh, imposter syndrome. It's always there. It's always that little gremlin bubbling.
Yeah.
Regardless of where you are and what you're doing. Who am I to think that I have... And it's an Irish... Come on. It's something that we've grown up with.
Don't get above your station.
Yeah, exact notions. Yeah. No notions.
Yeah.
And I think, anytime I go to a conference, dev conferences, okay, in the blockchain sphere, that's where I feel very uncomfortable in the development world, because I'm a sales snake as far as they're concerned. But I do also think, well, how do you think your technology is going to see the light of day unless you've got somebody who can commercially communicate it to your intended audience?
Yeah.
So we have interesting conversations there. But these guys and gals are so incredibly technically fantastic at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are really down to earth, and you can have a conversation over coffee. And then others may say, oh, well, who are you and what do you do? It's like, well, that's not a job. What do you think you're doing here? So, but then it's great that people have the ability to say something in the millennium sphere, rather than just go off and maybe say it behind your back, because it's something that you can address there and then and get into a deeper conversation. But somebody told me recently on the startups sphere, Alistair Cameron from Starticus, he was involved in Startup Week a couple of weeks back, and he said that he's from I think it's Manchester in the UK, and when he moved over to Northern Ireland to set up his marketing and startup business, he was told by somebody in a networking room, well, who do you think you are to think that you can do that? And it has just stuck with me for weeks since, because I think that's what I would say to myself. And imagine hearing somebody in a room say that back to you, and then just go, well, do you know what? I'm going to bloody show you.
Yeah.
And that's where you source your energy. That's the fuel to your fire. Keep going. Keep going. So shout out to Alistair Cameron there.
Absolutely. I love that. All right. Well, we've covered a lot. What if Owen were here, he'd ask his favorite question of the entire conversation, which is, what would be one thing that people wouldn't expect to know about Sorcha Mulligan?
Oh, we went through a lot there. I think it's the shark conservation element. There has been, and this is media portrayal and Hollywood portrayal as well, that there's a common theme there here as well for the media. I mean, don't get me started on that. No accountability for false portrayal of what's happening out there. But the shark finning industry in particular, when I was out in NGOs across Southeast Asia, contributing towards mapping the sharks, the different species in the ecosystem and the decline over a period of time, and also going to fisheries and seeing a lot of finned, beautiful animals. Just
terrible. Yeah.
It's hundreds of millions every year. They are the dogs of the ocean, and if you could imagine doing that to a dog, to take away their limbs and just leave them there to die, it's pretty horrific. And I just think, being conscious of the restaurants that we eat in, what's on the menu. If you see something like shark fin soup on a menu anywhere you go in the world, make a point of closing the menu, getting up out of your seat and walking out the door and telling the waiters why you've left.
Yeah.
I think that if everybody could do that about anything that they're passionate about, make a stand and let people know. My brothers recently did that in a restaurant when they were in Japan. And I was so proud of them, so proud. But they made a point, and it was because of what I told them over the years. One person can make a difference. You
can. And not to make light of this at all, but it reminds me of the time I was in a petrol station, a month ago, and there was someone in the shop, and they had a stand set up selling vaping products.
Right.
And I had just heard, whatever I had just heard about them recently, but on the way out, they said to me, would you like and
Wow.
I said, those things kill people.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we're offering you a pen. Would you like a pen?
Pens can kill people.
Pen is mightier than the sword.
Yes, very
Okay.
good.
Sorcha, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank
show.
you.
It's been great having you here. It's an incredible story. And best of luck making this all happen. It needs to
Thank
happen.
you.
Money never sleeps, pal.
That does it for this week, folks. And thanks to Sorcha for opening up her mind to help us figure out why she does what she does. Links and show notes for this episode are on moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online. Remember, if you or a colleague need help attracting or retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with the team at Top Tier Recruitment, as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for editing and recording this podcast. As for me, I increase the odds of startup success. Get in touch through the contact page on norioventures.com, and you can follow Owen on Twitter at OwenFitzgerald9. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!